Okay, let's see. I need to figure out how to get this all set up properly. I'm trying to be semi put together, but we'll see. Okay. All right. So let me know if you can hear me, and we'll see if that comes up. But basically, we are going to be live streaming my process as I get started on my main naming language for my next writing project. And you'll see here, this is the program I've been working on for, I guess, maintaining and managing and generating these naming languages. I had a couple of videos like that before. Um, so you can always check those out at some point. But we're going to be expanding on it a lot and building a lot of language specific stuff and getting a little bit more into the Conlangy bits, a bit more grammar than I've used before, but not a ton. And I'll go over, I guess, my goals and everything in a minute, but a few disclaimers for everybody. First, I have literally no idea what I'm doing, which I think most of the people that are watching live right now already know. I've watched some YouTube videos, mainly stuff by Artifixian and Biblaridian, and some of the books. I can't remember what the book is called, but the guy who wrote or invented Conlang Dothraki wrote. I read that, but that kind of like the terms don't. I can barely explain English grammar to people, so keep that in mind. Also, I'm new to streaming, so I'm awkward, so you're warned now. And also, you will probably hear my kids in the background because they're supposed to be going to bed, but they probably are not. So we'll see. But let's see. Hello, everybody. I don't know what that means. Okay, so I have this giant random README file right now, which is all the notes I've prepared for this process. So basically, the language that we're going to be creating for this is going to be used in my book, which is going to be written in English. So my kind of goal for that is that we will think about the way it's going to be used as it will have been translated into English. So names, obviously, we're going to say aren't going to be translated, but a lot of the other words would have been. This is kind of how I like to think about books in general, that in theory, they would be written in the in-world language, but then translated into English. So, so we're only going to build things that would not have been translated away. So basically, we're sticking to the English alphabet, and we're not going to worry about anything that's like sounds because we won't have sounds. It will all be written. So we're going to start from an alphabet. So some background rules, goals in general are that I want to kind of keep it grammatically close to English so that the spell language in comparison can sufficiently like be odd, because I want the spell language, which is going to have a lot more actual like grammar and sentences and everything to it. I want that in comparison to this to still make sense. Like if you're reading this in English and it's like, oh yes, and we're trying to translate this and it has this interesting syllable structure, but it's actually the same one that English has, then the reader would be confused. So I want to avoid that. Um, the big theme in that book is like the duality of society and nature. So any ways that I can kind of pull that theme into the language would be fun. And then I want it to be sufficiently different and interesting, which, I feel like why do this if you don't want to do that? But let's see. Okay, so step one is the phonology, and I made this for myself as a note. I don't know how useful it's going to be, but it's sort of like a mocked version of an IPA chart. IPA. I think that's the right IAP? IPA. I think it's IPA. um, but sort of mocking out what the letters would be for pronouncing them phonetically that I think could be pronounceable in English. And so I wrote down some notes here, and this is all from watching Biblaridian's like how to make a language guide, just on selecting sounds. And while we won't have sounds per se, I figured we could still kind of try to stick to this sort of a structure, right? Like where we're trying to aim for sound symmetry and we're trying not to, you know, completely go off the rails with some of these other general rules that tend to happen. So let's see. Is this where? Yes. So step one is choosing which sounds and letters we want to do. And I made a test version of this where I just kind of like faked it. And I was just, I don't know, picking random things. And that's this whole chunk here. So basically, I took out a bunch of letters and sounds. I set some random settings and went with a sort of Mandarin inspired ish sort of feel with some of the letters that were allowed, some of the ones that weren't, some of the more probable clusters, and then just generated some random stuff just to see what would come out. So that's sort of my test sample, but it's also not following any of the other guidelines we went with before. So if we come back up here, let's see. Yeah, the other thing is we want to keep this sufficiently different from the other naming languages that I have, which are mainly this one, which is the like invading language. It's the language of the people that are invading. So these are the rules. So we probably don't want to do this, right? So like maybe this one doesn't have R, maybe we want to have R. We maybe don't want to have lots of these sounds, right? Probably commonly ends in consonants. Yeah, so like we can copy this over probably. Let's see. And if anyone has any ideas or thoughts or suggestions, feel free to throw them out. I'm just kind of making stuff up, thinking about it. But if we keep R, we're right here. So if we want to aim for sound symmetry, then we would want to kind of keep a decent bit of stuff in this row and a decent bit of stuff in this column, which is fine. We probably want to avoid these, so the TS, CS, PS sounds, so that it is distinct enough. So we want to have R, avoid ES, CS, PS. And then that's probably, you know, maybe less vowels. Because I'm trying to think of something like weird that we could do that's not really weird. We could probably remove a couple resonants, remove some of these less common things. So we want to go, see, what did I have before? Yeah, so this sort of lines up with that. So no P or B, which is fine. I did have the glottal stop in, which I don't know if I want to keep that or not. It's a little weird, and I think I would prefer to use it as like a distinction between certain like syllables versus like, you know, so like have it, but use it more from a grammatical sense, I guess, than a phonology sense. You have a glottal stop. Nice. So question, do you use that as like a separator or do you use that as actually like a random consonant kind of a thing? But yeah, so if we took these out, then we wouldn't necessarily need as much symmetry over here. And then C, Q, M. I mean, taking out C and Q is more just choosing which of these sounds we're going with. Always syllable separators, but not always necessarily word separators. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that to me at least seems like a pretty intuitive way to do it with those. So like we might do that still as a separator, but not necessarily in the generation of them. Like I'd put that in the rules for how it combines syllables potentially. So I'm gonna take that out. Well, actually, hold on. Let's whenever I include glottal stops and oh, adjectives. consonant plus glottal stop. Oh, that's a cool way to do it. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. You said ejectives, and I was like, what is that? But yeah, that makes sense. TSK. Okay, so that's an option too that we could go with. That could be fun. Yeah. Oh, that's true. That would make interesting prefixes. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's think on that then. We might come back to having the glottal stops. I'm not sure if we'll keep that in the middle. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. All right, let's take them out for now. I apologize. There we go. It's gonna do that constantly. Oh, you sent a link? I did not see a link. I don't know if those show up very easily in YouTube comments because I don't know if they're clickable. But I'm thinking we take out these because they're a little bit weirder. Oh, thank you, the lonely robot. I appreciate that. Good luck studying. I am very happy I am not in school anymore. I enjoy learning, but I don't like the having to learn on someone else's schedule. That doesn't work very well for me. I prefer to just like binge learn things when I am hyper fixated on them, and that's kind of how I like to do it. Okay, so this one doesn't have C's. We could have C's instead of K's. I tend to prefer K's if we're only going to have one of them, but let's see. I think we should keep NG. I do like that. So if we keep that, we want to keep a couple other things in the velar column, I think. So maybe we keep, I don't know. I don't know if I want to keep Q. Let's keep G because we already have the NG, and let's keep K. Let's get rid of Q. Let's keep X. Yeah, I agree. I think C's get confusing. I feel like K's are a little bit more consistent in how they're pronounced, and since we can't control how people pronounce this for the use case of this, NG could even be the glottal stop. Wait, what? Is that a thing? Is that a thing? Can it be? This is so crazy. Yeah, but yeah, I think I prefer K's over C's. C's just kind of, I don't know. They're too confusing when you can't control how they're pronounced. We could take Y's out. That would be weird. Taking Y's out would be very weird. We'll try it for now. We can always put it back in. So then Pladles. I think we should keep J. I am kind of, there is a little bit more of like a Mandarin-esque feel to the phonology. I've been watching a lot of like C-dramas and K-dramas lately, so I've just been listening to it a lot, and it just like, I don't know. I'm like, I like the sounds of all that, so I think we'll get rid of these, mostly because they're weird, and I think it would be more difficult to include those, and I think including them as a English pronounceable thing is a little, like, I don't know if people would actually pronounce them correctly if they were just spelt like that, so we'll do that. Yeah. Germinate such double consonants could be fascinating. Oh. So germinate slash doubled consonants. Is that like a sound, or is that like you would have like in the coda or something, you would have multiple consonants, or just like they would have a special sound? I am not familiar with that term. Or is it just like replacing a letter in certain cases with multiple consonants to make the sound more clear? Is that what that means? see. Germinate is where the consonant is lengthened. Oh, I do like that. Ooh, I do like that. We could germinate the consonants. I do like that. That would be fun from a spelling perspective. And that would basically be allowing just like double consonants in my filters, which let me just see. Yeah, these are the only ones that I have blocked at like a base program level right now. So it would allow any other doubled consonants. Which I could always change this to be a different kind of filter if we ended up wanting some of those to be in there. But I like that. I'm trying to, what phase would that be? That might be something that I would do after generating the word to change the consonants, or I might have to come up with like a logical way that it would automatically do that in some cases. Like, I don't know if there's a rule for when you would lengthen them, like if they're in the middle or something. Oh, hello, Story Girl 83. Yeah, I don't know how long we'll be doing this either. I'm thinking at least an hour, but we'll see if we're, going strong. But hi. Yeah, so we need to figure out what the rule here would be. Generation. Because I can always manually do that after I generate and then add it to the lexicon. Or I can come up with like specific scenarios where that would be done, but I do like that. And I can always research that some more off stream too. But yeah, so then maybe I'll take off this if we're going to do that, because that's already, 2 letters, and it would essentially be the same thing from a reading it perspective. So yeah, so we have this column and this column, and PH, let's get rid of that. I don't think we need that one. And then, do we want these? Because they're not technically like, they're balanced out over here. I don't know if for sound symmetry, having, well, no, because we have these over here too right now. So I feel like we could get rid of these. I don't know if that would be weird or not, but no F's or V's. That could be interesting. Let's just see what happens if we do that. Do I want to take these out? So if I have just W and M over here, I don't know if that's enough for symmetry, because this is, I think, a liquid technically. What if V and W get merged? Oh, that's interesting. So like basically they would just become the same letter at some point, or so spelling wise I would just use one of them, and everything that would, how would I do that logistically? Because it wouldn't just be the sounds of them, it would be like which letter would I use? North Germanic languages. They just wrote it with V. Interesting. So they just wrote it with V, but it could be a W sound or a V sound, which I wouldn't have any control over how they pronounce it, but it could be cool to have a V instead of a W. Where was that? And then it wouldn't necessarily just be that kind. I could get rid of the W. And that gets rid of this little portion here, which I think would be fine. So then I'm still trying to decide whether or not I want P and B. Their P is pretty common. So P, T, K, M, and N are pretty common in languages. So I feel like if I were going to get rid of M, I shouldn't also get rid of these. So that might be a little bit like too weird or too restrictive. But again, like there's not going to, like I'm not writing a full language in this, right? So like the use cases of how many words you're going to see in this language is going to be limited. So I want it to be, you know, less is more type thing. Maybe, oh, sound might be something like VH. Oh, I like that. I like that. I like that actually. And we could still pretend that's an approximate. I like that. Yeah, I think that's good, and I think it helps phonetically, to where it's still sort of distinct but pronounceable. I like it. And that's not something you see in English. Exactly. That's what I like. I want it to be distinct from English, because I don't have a lot of stuff in here so far, I think, that's different from English. Like, this, I think, isn't I mean, we have it in English, this sound, the, like, IPA character that it actually is. Obviously, having those letters like that is definitely in English, like sing, right? But this is a distinct sound. I can't remember what the actual IPA character for that is, but an English reader, I don't think would notice that this is weird, right? It might, because if we are taking out the W over there, I'm going to take this one out. We'll take this out, and then what had we said that this guy was doing? So no R, lots of TS, CS, PS. I also took out Z's entirely and X's in that language. So we definitely want to keep those. Yeah, and they're using C and we're using K. They took out R. So we should definitely keep R. We could be weird and take out L. That would be odd. Should have at least some voiced resonance. We've already changed W. Yeah. Yeah, it is definitely difficult. The fact that I'm not even letting myself use like IPA characters helps, because I'm kind of restricted to what I can spell in English, which I think helps, but it's hard to make it distinctive. It's definitely a struggle. And I feel like, I can't remember where I read it, but it basically said that once you get into the other than the sounds, right? But once you get into the like percentages of how often different sounds and letter combinations show up, that like that can add a lot of the uniqueness to it. Because obviously, like, I'm using the same alphabet, like, you can't be that weird with it. But yeah, so we have Z's, we have S's. TS was popular in the other one, so we're going to take that out for distinction purposes. And then I don't want the CH because we took out C, and I don't even want to deal with that. I'm going to take this one out because I'm still unsure if people would pronounce that distinctly enough, because we have both D and G, so like it would come up anyway in the in it. So let's see, we have J's. Okay, so do we have syllable or sound symmetry? I mean, like, we have a few things that are kind of like H is the only thing in this column, but I think that's fine because like this VH sound kind of, I don't know. I think it's fine. I think it's fine. And then this is fine. J doesn't have anything else in its column. Neither does V. I don't know if that's fine. I think maybe the thing that wouldn't be fine is if you have something maybe that doesn't have anything in that column or row. Maybe. But I feel like we should take out something up here. And taking out a pretty common thing could be fairly distinct. I sort of lean towards taking out M. Probably treat J as in the same column as the post. Oh, yeah, just keep this J and get rid of this one because it's not like people are going to pronounce it the same or differently anyway. Yeah. Okay, good call. Now it's not separate. So the only separate one I have right now is a V, which I want to keep because of this whole thing. But that sort of puts these more similar from a sound perspective anyway, I think. Maybe we take out, let's see. Maybe we take away, do I want to take away M? Let me look at the random stuff that this generated before. Did I have M when I was playing around with this? No, I didn't. So I did take out M when I was playing around this before, and I took out P and B, which I feel like is probably a bit much, but it does look like this does look pretty distinctly not English, which is a bonus. So P, B, and M I had taken out when I was playing with this before. I don't okay. These are, so this automatically makes the sound not necessarily bilabial, I think, based off where it sounds like it's coming. Like, it's not all up here in the front of my lips. It's like, it's sort of in between my teeth and my lips. So I feel like I could sort of treat this as being here if I wanted to, or sort of in a weird in-between state. So if I did that, I could take P, B, and M away. And that would leave us with a much more smaller set of sounds, which I still have T, I have K, I have N, we still have S, we still have H. So like I feel like that's reasonable. So we can try that. And if we end up needing to come back in and add it later, we can. So, okay. So that's the phonology. And let me copy this over here. Oh, right, because this isn't a MD file. So we have V, VH, TD. So the one thing that might be a problem, let me get these. Are you thinking of this as an alphabet or something like a syllabary or abjad? I'm thinking it will be an alphabet. The other language, or I think based off my limited understanding of what those things mean, which I think those are like writing language, like writing. Syllabary is where you would have a different character for each syllable, and that syllable, right? Like that syllable is distinct, and then you would write with each syllable, and then alphabet is you write with each letter. And then I can't remember what abjad is. That's not the logographic one where is that like a median middle one maybe? I'm not sure. But if I'm understanding the question right, this would be an alphabet. The other language that they're going to be basically translating in this book is sort of a spell language, but in a code form. So they have to break a code, which is going to be a mix of a syllabary and I have this written down somewhere, but the one that's like a character per word. It's going to be a mix of those where some things it has the characters for the words, and then sometimes it uses like those characters for the starting sounds of things for syllabaries, and like that to kind of make it confusing for translation purposes. So I think having this one be an alphabet would make it reasonable that those other things would be more complicated from them. So like the syllables would be ka, ta, ga, etc. Yeah. So I think this is an alphabet. Abjad drops written vowels. Definitely not doing that one. That would be so confusing, I think, for English readers to be reading a book and there's just no vowels in anything. It would be like hard mode, but yeah, so alphabet. But the thing that might be a slight problem for some of these that we're treating differently, so we're treating J as the post. Oh wait, no, because we didn't move anything between columns just rows, and I don't distinguish between the rows because the rows don't matter from a like where the sounds can come in what order perspective for how my program works. So I think this is actually going to be fine because these are going to line up with how I categorized all the sounds here. We may need to add a couple, but that is fine. So we still have our S's, so we'll have our let's see, siblings. I think that's what that was. I'll verify that later, but I think it's siblings. Siblings. There we go. So we still have that. Plosives, we don't have P, we don't have B. We still have T, D, K, G. We took out Q. Took out T, Y, G, Y. Okay. And then we have no M. I kept NG, but not NY. Let's see. Took out F. We still have V. We also have a new VH. So I'll have to add that. We have S's and Z's. SH, ZH, J. No CH. I'm almost tempted to just take out, no, because the other one took out S's, so we should keep S's, because it'd be weird if both languages don't have S's, unless it's like you could say it's something because they share a, proto-language something or other up in the tree, but that wouldn't, like, there's not enough for that to be, like, for people to pick up on that, like, where that would be distinguishable, like if there was a lot of languages being used and a lot of it being shown, I think that could be picked up on, but I'm not going to worry about that. For this right now anyway. WLR, we took out Y. We kept H, right? Did we not keep H? Did I just forget it? We kept H. Okay. So A-I-O-U. I don't see any reason to remove a vowel, I don't think. I mean, we could remove a vowel. I'm not sure. I really struggle with the vowels because like the chart is very like the types of sounds that they can make. Like I don't even know if there's like a good schematic for knowing what to delete where to keep it sort of in line with some of these other ones, given just all the different ways you can pronounce the vowels in different places in English. Like I can't really get away from that. So V, V, H, T, D, N, S, V. Do I have DZ somewhere? What did we say DZ was? Affricate. Am I considering that to be a fricative for this? I'll figure that out. R, L, S, H, Z, H, J, K, G, N, G, X. Okay. So that's all of that. And then we just need to add VH and DZ to the fricatives, potentially. I need to add it here. Okay, so I think that's what that would be. C. VH should be the same as R and L. R and L. Okay, so that's an approximate. So VH, VH. So it's an approximate. So then checking the rules here for what makes sense. So types can't follow in onset. So types that it can't follow in the onset. So over here I was saying nasal, so that would be like moo, 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 or I think that's what that's saying. So vn, I think is fine. So I don't think we need to include nasals here. I think that's like pronounceable from an English perspective. And then letters it can't follow. So NG, NY. Yeah, I would agree with that. That would be weird. And then types it can't follow in the coda. Letters it can't follow in coda. I think that's fine. I think this is fine for VH. So let's add that to the approximates. And then this is going to mess up some of my validating, but we'll run into those and fix it later. So that's VH. Then we need to add DZ, which DZ. I mean, same as J. Yeah, which is up there. So we'll add it here. So DZ, DZ, fricative, types can't follow in onset, so plosives being that column, so yeah, no, that would be weird. Letters it can't follow. Already rules out all the plosives, that's probably fine. I am going to add sibilant here, I think, because I don't think that makes sense to have those sounds. I think that would be hard to pronounce. And then, yes, I think that's fine. And then we'll add an S there. Best of. Same as KS. I feel like this is probably correct. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that works. So then we can add this to the fricatives. Okay. So that is our phonology. And, you know, whatever. So then the next step, I'll delete all of this because we don't need this anymore. Okay, so then we have the phonotactics, which, you know, rules governing distributions of sounds in a language. And so I started doing some research on this. I think this is one of the things that I've struggled to find a super definitive, like, these are a bunch of example options, which I think just means I need to do a lot more research on like NatLangs and various Conlangs to kind of get an idea of what's available. But, you know, the way I had looked at this before was like, oh, like, you know, how many consonants you can have followed by a vowel, followed by how many consonants, like, can you have, like, do you have to have a coda? Can you optionally have a coda? Like, all that kind of syllable shape. But that's kind of like, I think that's kind of basic based off some of the research I've been doing lately, right? So my program right now allows for a basic syllable shape, which is basically you can say these are how many onset lengths are like allowed, and this is the probability of each one. Same thing for nucleus, same thing for coda, which doesn't let you do anything weird right now, which I could definitely do something weirder. I was watching one of Colin Gore's videos on creating, I guess, like names for things and stuff and working on that. And he sort of explained his syllable structure, which was like sesquisyllabic structure, I think he called it. And this is just kind of copied from his video just so I had an example of that. But like this is really interesting. And when I looked at these syllables and like the sounds that were generated from that, like they looked very distinctive, which I think is, you know, really cool. And that is, I want to go with something really distinctive, but I don't know if this type of thing would be too complex for my poor little newbie brain. And I was looking at this one came up while I was Googling it, and I still don't even understand what this means. But the Shenyang model, the initial final, which, you know, it might be, I think it's like what, you have an optional, like a consonant at the beginning, and then I don't know if this is referring to the coda or this, or I'm not sure, but I don't know what we want to go with there. If we want to go with something simpler, then we can always just go with like the opposite here. So the invading language has a 20% chance of no onset, 45% chance of one sound, I guess, a 30% chance of two, and a 5% chance of three. So it allows up to 3 consonant sounds. The nucleus can be, you know, is more likely to be 2 and then 1 and then 3. And then the coda, wow, I still need to go through and fix my typos. That's coda. Is most likely to be 1, followed by 2, followed by 3, 4, and then 0 is very rare. So it's very rare for it to have no coda at all in a syllable, which is fine. This allows longer lengths, right? So I could either try to weight it more towards having smaller syllables or towards longer syllables. So this normally has 1. I could make it really rare for it to have an onset. I could make it more common for it to have multiple characters. Let's see, what did we do before when I was playing around with this? Okay, I made it incredibly likely for it to only have 1 consonant sound in the onset, and then very rare to have anything else, which I think would be relatively distinctive. And then it normally has 1 character in the nucleus, or sorry, 1 vowel sound, wow. And then half of the time it had no coda, and then the other half it either had 1 or 2, which is how you got this kind of a word shape. Which, if we go back over here to some of the ones it was generating, like these are all definitely a little bit longer, right? Like you don't have a lot of like you have a single consonant there and here, but a lot of them are like multiple. So I think leaning towards shorter vowel clusters, shorter consonant clusters might be a good move here. So I vote, well, I don't know why I'm saying I vote because I'm just doing it. But I like the idea of leaning more towards something like this. But I kind of want to do something weird, right? Where like you can't have certain characters in certain parts of it, or like I want to do a little something weird. Not this weird, because that's like someone who actually knows how to Conlang, and I'm like someone that barely understands English grammar. So we should attempt to have reasonable goals here. Okay, so it's basically like in certain parts you have a smaller set of allowed. Hello, Seb. The party is, I want to say, just getting started, but you know, it's mostly just me rambling here and then random good suggestions. But yeah, so I think I can actually pretty easily, without changing any of my code, incorporate something where certain parts are more or less likely, in terms of like something like this, where if there's a first consonant, it has to be one of these, which that's a C, which I thought was consonant, not, I don't know. But I think I could do something like this in a more simplified manner to get a more interesting syllable structure. Let me go up to my language rules. This is my base class. I apologize for people that aren't familiar with code and are just staring at this like, what the hell is going on? Okay, so this is if I'm adding custom cluster weights for different onsets versus like if it's at the beginning or end of a word versus like just in the syllable, which are the ones that I was talking about before. And then if there's any letters. So if I could do letter weights. So basically what I could do is I could change the weights of the letters that I don't want to appear in either like the middle onset or initial onset or middle coda, ending coda, etc. Or just, I think I have onset letter weights. Do I have this just for like onset in general, or would I just need to use the same thing? Yeah, so I think I could do that, where essentially I can say, okay, this at the beginning of a word in the onset, we might have these separate letters that aren't allowed versus these ones that are. I could definitely do that, which would be fine. Yeah, we could do that. So I know it's supposed to be an override. Am I not overriding this properly? Oh no, because it's identical right now, so that's fine. Okay, so middle onset letter weights, custom initial onset letter weight. So if I could just put the same thing in both of these if I want it to not matter based off where in the word it is, unless I want to have something be less likely at the beginning or the end. So let's see, custom ending coda letter weights. So what did they do? They used categories, I think, here. So like these, I think, are all liquids. So I could do something like that, right? Where I only allow like this, VHRL, or like I feel like I could pick a grouping like that where I either allow it or disallow it. So that could either be VH, R, and L, or I could do P, D, A, G, X, H, V. I could also alternatively do like V and VH, X or H. Those all seem like distinctive little groups of some sounds. Okay, so let's see. And this is relevant. So if I do this, where it can either be 1 or 2 syllables, then I think with the way this would work is both this would only apply to the first one. And so if there's only ever 1 syllable, you would only have an initial onset, you wouldn't have a middle onset. So if I wanted it to be something where like you have this rule and then you have like a separate syllable that's like syllable 2, right? This would be your onset one. And if it was only 1, it would just have this. So if I wanted to start with something, I could do that, assuming I keep 1 or 2 syllables, which I kind of like the idea of that given the other language has a lot longer names. So I feel like that would be fairly distinctive. So VH and XH for middle coda or ending coda. So we could have it only end in certain things. But then, and I guess this is where maybe you would think about some of the rules you want to go with before you start deciding on this type of thing. Because if I have a lot of affixes, like, you know, that attach to the beginning or the end, then it would sort of mess with this. Unless I think I'm more likely to have postfixes at the end for different things, right? Than prefixes. Just because, like, especially with names, I feel like the letter and sound it starts with will make it the most distinguishable for a reader to tell that it's the same name being used. So I think if we're going to make anything weird, it should be this one, because then it won't get obfuscated away by adding on an affix to it. Maybe. I'm mostly making that up, but it sounds semi-reasonable to me. So if we want to limit the initial onset, we could do, I'm trying to think about what wouldn't be weird. This is also the only things it could start with too, though. Maybe we do middle onset, actually. Because then it still gives us a lot of options for the first letters in the first onset, right? Which again, like, it makes it the most distinctive. Like, you don't want all your names to start with the same 4 letters, or it's going to be really hard for readers to keep them separate. So I think this one should be the weird one. I think that makes sense. So then it would be like if you have 2 syllables, then you would see this in the second one. And I guess in theory, we could do this one too. And then these would only come up in pairs together, right? Because if you have a middle onset, that means you have a second syllable, which means you have that, wait, onset, coda. Hold on, I might be switching these. Hold on, give me a second. The onset and the coda. Initial, middle, ending, middle. Middle. Yes, okay, middle. I'm not losing it. I'm only losing it a little bit. So these two could be weird, and you would only ever get them together. So it would be coda middle. So let's move this one up here just so that they're in the order they would appear to Word. Let's get rid of these. And so we could have, you would only ever have maybe like, what would make sense? For limiting it. Maybe we take away one of these groups. T, D, K, G, R plosives. So if we're looking at plosives, they, types A can't follow in onset in coda. So F, V, J, X, M, N, G, Y. So you've hit the point in the world building project where your own reality starts to break down. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like this might be one where I set everything else up and we try a couple of different things and we just hit randomly generate a bunch of times and see what that looks like. Because otherwise I think it's a little bit too hard to conceptualize like everything that you would end up getting there. So let me do that real quick, and I'm going to start with what I have here. So 5% chance onset here, 85% chance of 1. That is a poor, sad little screaming face. Oh, it's the vibes though. Okay, and then 2 is 5%, and 3 is also 5%. Nucleus is 70% chance of 1, 30% chance of 2. Get rid of that. Coda, 50% chance 0. And, oh, well, that's actually kind of relevant. Because, what am I doing? I'm doing something wrong. 25. Okay. If we're so likely to have 0 characters in the coda, which let me just rename this for all of us. That would actually make, because it wouldn't always have, right, a middle coda and a middle onset. because there's a small % chance of not having the onset. So 5% chance not to have, and this would be a 50% chance not to have. So I think we'd end up seeing like the things that, I don't know, but I think that'll be a factor when we start randomly generating these. So the name syllable weights, I don't know if this really matters. We'll say 50% chance of 1 syllable, 50% chance of 2. Okay, we did this, we did this, we did this. So we're gonna go here. Do I already have this set up? Island Language Builder. Get World Builder. Build random word. So in theory, if I run this, which we can do that right now, and we can see what this looks like. Okay, so that's fine. Tixes. Look high. Slaw. Oops. It's true. Yeah, like I feel like these look relatively reasonable. Lolv. That's awesome. I like that one a lot. It just looks so dumb. It looks like you were typing LOL and then had a typo. So if we then go here and play with this, just for an example, because what is this a map of? String to double. Yeah, okay. DD. Okay, so let's say we do that. Let's see what it looks like. Oh, that's weird. Grew. I'm surprised I don't validate that out. 3 U's. Okay. Apparently I allow 3 U's. I don't know why I allow 3 U's. Which I feel like I probably shouldn't allow 3 U's. We'll yeah, because there's no reason to have 3 U's. We don't need that. Shish read. Suj lols. All the lols again. Lucia. I mean, I feel like this is fine. Takva. Zinthao. Cannot pronounce that one. Mostly just because I'm useless. Some of these are getting a little weird. Like, VXV. Tilvixvir. VXV. I feel like that is not a great cluster thing there. Okay. I don't know, honestly. I feel like maybe it's fine. It might be a little limiting, perhaps, but we have a 50% chance not to have this in the first place. So normally we don't have it, and in the odd chance that we do, it can't be one of those. Which, this is the middle coda letter weights. So that would be like this, or I think that's fine. Maybe we can leave it for now and come back to it. So let's say we go with that. If we go with that, which I think we'll probably tweak at some point, that would be our phonotactics. I think that's all we need to do. So let's move on to grammar. And I have a lot of notes here because this is the part where I feel like most of the stuff is in conlanging, but also we are the most restricted here. And I did a bunch of like brainstorming on what I think would make sense. And if anyone has any other suggestions for like, oh, hey, these like grammatical concepts or things would still potentially be applicable for how this language is being used, let me know. But obviously, like any rules for nouns would be generally relevant. I don't think we need tenses or valency or anything like that. I think word order will matter in a few cases, mainly where we're doing compounding. So, like, if we want to create a noun that will be a place name that means like green tree, we need to know if green is going to be before or after tree. So I think that part of the ordering will matter, right? Yeah, basically, does the modifier precede or follow the noun? Just so we can use that in compounding. So yeah, that's basically what I just said. So is adjectives allowed before or after the noun? And then I think, did I have notes on this at some point? I'm not sure if that affects the likelihood of having other things that we'll actually care about, but we need to figure that out. We need to figure out if there's some basic compounding rules, like can you have a root? Do you need to have something between them to make that work? Do you put a space between compound words? Those are all things that I saw in the videos as like things to think about. My thoughts on it are no space between compound words, because then it doesn't feel like a compound word to me. So I'm going to say no. And then I don't know about having something to combine roots. Let's see. Head, initial, finalness, adjective before, after, can, affect, subject, verb, object, ordering. Yes, that's what we want. We want to figure that out. Yes, that is what we need to figure out, which is, I think, we need to figure that out. And then I lean towards not needing something between roots, but allowing two roots to be combined. Like, I feel like that would give us a lot more flexibility in compounding, especially given that people aren't going to know what these mean. They're just going to potentially pick up on patterns, right? So the only way I think people would be able to tell is if they're looking at like a map and they see like, oh, like near the coast, a lot of these words has similar like, you know, chunks in them, similar morphemes. Oh, I bet that means something. Like that's all people are going to be able to get out of this, other than me. So I vote we allow all the compounding, even root to root. and that can be fine. It can be like tree bird. That's fine. That can be a place name, right? And then we're not going to add anything in between them. That's my thought there. Yes. Adjective ordering depends on basic word orders and whether adjectives are noun or verb-like. I don't think that's going to matter too much for us because we won't really have verbs that will be used as verbs per se. So I think maybe we'll just pick either head initial or head final to decide which side the adjectives go on, I think. And then I go back and forth on whether or not we should have plurality, because we would never use it to refer, oh, I want this many of something, right? Because all of that would be written in English. But I could see some of them being in place names, right? Like this is the place of many rivers or 2 rivers, right? Like I could see that being in a place name. So, but also in a place name, well, I guess that could be whatever I want. I like the idea of things being affixes. I like the idea of that. I just think that's fun. And then, I would need it if we do have that, which I could also just say I don't want to have that. It's too complicated. I would have to define how many cases I want and whether or not there'd be a distinction for like quantifying versus mass nouns, which then I'd also have to distinguish that or decide if I had a different like classes of nouns, because it could also be different for different classes of nouns. So I'm not sure what I want to do on that yet, but that's a question. And then I need to decide on my noun cases and my noun classes. And this is relevant for the most part. For noun cases, I mean, obviously, like, plurality is the thing. I don't want to deal with gender or, like, size, because, I mean, a lot of this I feel like would only come up when you are, like, in normal language, right? Like, if you're talking about something in relation to some meaning, right? Like, if you're just saying this is the name of a thing, I don't think these would show up in proper nouns. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think these would show up in proper nouns. So I think maybe, other than having plurality, I don't think I should add any other noun cases. I don't think they would come up. But what I do want to have is I do want to add honorifics, which I don't know if that counts as a noun case. That might be a noun case. Something to consider are possessed object marked for possessions or the possessor's mark. Bob's cat. Bob is cat. Yeah. Yeah, that definitely could show up in the places of locations. Oh, that's a good point. Okay. So we're doing plurality. And I do think we would need to include possession then. Or at least decide if there's going to be like, because you can have like separate words for that. Like a belongs to that is just like would go between them depending on your order, right? Like this belongs to this, which could be a way to do it. Or I could have like a little add-on. I think if I want to have plurality in my compounding, like attached to the nouns, as I guess, is that an inflection? I don't know. It could be interesting to do the opposite with possession. Like that could be interesting. Like have like a short little, like just like a word. Like instead of having it be a noun case, have it be a separate word. And then I think that could be interesting because we don't have in English, well, I guess we do because we have the S for multiple. So we do have some level of plurality, but I want to have more plurality cases with our nouns here. But then maybe we make possession a separate goes between possessee and possessor. I can't spell. I don't know. Separate is one of those words that I can never spell correctly the first time. Like, I don't know why not. Possessee is a word. Yeah, so I think we'll do that. Because that would be interesting, and it would add a different, like, shape to those place names, right? Like something, blah, blah, blah. Could be an interesting to do that, like maybe single character. And then we'll also need to figure out, like, what that word order actually is. I sort of lean... I think, and this might be dumb. Tell me if this sounds dumb. But I think it might make sense to go with a more English-based word order. Because, well... Okay, if it's head initial or head final, would that make it change how the honorifics, like, I think I want the honorifics to be postfixes, to be added on at the end, or like dash at the end kind of thing. But would that follow head initial, head final? Like, do I need to make that consistent? Question for the group. Diminutives? Diminutives. Shortened form of a name. Oh. Yes. That's like a nickname, right? Like a casual diminutives. Is that what that is? Let me shorten this. What was I even saying? I don't even remember. That's head initial generally, but humans like suffixes more. Initial generally. So I'm totally not Googling suffix because I forgot which one it is. Okay, yeah, so that's a suffix. Is that the same as a postfix? Am I just dumb and using a word that's not a real thing? Okay, cat of Bob. Okay, yeah. So it can show up in head final. Okay, so head final could be cool then. Sticking fairly close to English and adding sprinkles of things like affix is a good way to do it. Yes, yes, and because the other thing is, like, I want to be able to point out things when they're having translation problems with the, like, spell code language thing, and so it being different to what the reader would expect too, I think would make that clear. There's a big difference between need to and follow most common trends. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yes, about the diminutives. Okay, yeah. I do like the idea of that. But, yes. Okay, so can show up in head final. But we could just kind of do whatever we want. So, is English head final or okay, it is head initial. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I vote we go with head initial then, because that is the most similar, and, like, you know, we can pick and choose our battles of things to have fun with. Making the language of the characters pretty familiar might also help sell the strange list of the invader. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a good selling point with that. Because, like, I want it to look distinct, but not be like, you know, yeah. I think that's what we want. Okay, so we'll do head initial, which would be verbs or adjectives, I guess. We'll say adjectives are more verb-like, I guess. Adjectives precede the objects. So that'll help us with word Ordering there. English isn't really head initial. English compounds are always head final. The red house instead of house red. The phrases can be mixed, often with a head initial preference. Okay. Well, we'll be more boring then. And we'll just pick one. Not always shorter. Janie is little Jane. Free. Oh yeah, like having yeah. Like what are those called? There's a word. I'm so bad with words. This is like the ADHD side of my brain. I'm so sorry. This is why I'm so bad with like this sort of terminology thing. What's the word like? Oh God, it's like a pet name kind of thing, right? Where you would have little there's a word. I can't remember what it is. It's driving me crazy now. Something that means like they're like names you give people or add on to it. I mean, maybe diminutive is literally what I'm looking for, but like terms of endearment, I guess maybe to add on to it. Diminutives, terms of endearment. The question of that. So then the question with that is though, if it is like multiple things like little Jane, my question would be if someone was translating that, would they keep that full phrase in the initial language, or would that have been like translated away? Like, would they have just written like little and then Jane being whatever the name is, right? Or Janie, right? Like, I feel like Jane to Janie. Yeah, I think I read that wrong the first time. Yeah, so if it's going like Janie, like adding, then I think they wouldn't have translated that away. Yes. Jane to Jane. Something like that. Which, not that I'm going to tell you what it is, but my pet name for my husband is definitely longer than his actual name. Kenning might be the word you're looking for. It's not the word I think I'm looking for. A compound expression with metaphorical meaning is a figure of speech in the type of circumlocution, a compound that employs figurative language in place of a more concrete single-word noun. I don't think that's what I'm looking for, but I do like that word, and I'm glad I know what it is now, at least for right now, until I forget it. Yes, okay, so it would be cool to have a diminutive them. Hypocorism. Probably not the word I was looking for, just because I definitely don't know that word, but that is a fun term. I feel like that would be a cool thing to have. Because I think I either want to have, and I don't want to have too many things, right? Because these need to be things that readers can pick up on without being told what they mean, right? When it comes to affecting like personal names. I'm already going to have honorifics for people. So if I have that in addition to like, maybe I'll have words for like certain relationships that don't match what words we typically have in English. So we have like aunt, uncle, whereas some like kinship systems might distinguish between like different generational groups or stuff like that a little bit differently, right? So like I could have a different word for those, although honestly that probably would have just been translated away. So let's not worry about that. I think having some form of diminutive would be much more fun. Can I spell? Diminutive. I think I spelled that right. I don't know. Yes, so I think maybe we go with the diminutive, something that implies like endearment, or like we could even have a few of them. That could be fun. And I think people would pick up on that because you would have the context for that being used in different places. So I think that would be fun to do. So let's go with diminutives, at least a few. So let's see. I keep jumping all over the place. I apologize. It's probably a little confusing. Yeah, so for possession, we're going to have a separate word that goes between possessing and possessor. And then for noun classes, noun classes. I'm going back and forth on this, but one of the themes, right, of the book is the that duality between of society and nature. So I don't know if I want to pull that in as a noun class or if that would just be weird and confusing. Like, let's see, it gives the language and the characters who speak it a ton of charm too. Yes, I think it would too. I think it would. I think diminutives will be good. We will definitely do that. Which actually I might just give it a, just so I remember. Of course, I now really can't spell. Okay. So my understanding, I think, of noun classes would just be they would have, right, their own inflectional morphology, which I think applies to, that would be plurality, and we're not doing that for possession. So it would literally just be, I think plurality would apply differently to these different types of noun classes. I think that's the only way it would come up, which plurality, I'm never going to have plurality attached to people, right? Because it's not going to be like, I'm not going to name a town like many Bobs, right? Like it would be like many trees, right? It would be things that are naturalistic, not, I think, society based. So I think even if I did a noun class of society and of nature, I would never use those distinctions, I think, anyway. So maybe we just don't do noun classes. Maybe, because I can't think of a realistic way, unless I added some other features where that would ever be prevalent, unless I'm not remembering what those mean correctly. So we'll say for now, unless anyone has, you know, a way I could use it, we'll say no noun class. So then moving on to, which this is the commenter on the YouTube video that mentioned this, but CJ Lloyd informed me that onomastics was the word I kept trying to think of when I was trying to research linguistics of names, which is brilliant. So the onomastics, so rules for personal names. And I've also I see more of this when I did research on different like kinship structures on how you would distinguish the different types of names that I did just like Googling this on my own. Like I struggled to find a good resource for this, but this sort of a thing, right? So like I could just do first name, last name, which I think would be the most approachable for an English speaker, especially if I'm adding on diminutives or what was the other one? Honorifics. I think having less names would make the most sense in that case. Yeah, I think so. So I think maybe we'd be a little boring here. We just have first names, which would be like the individual personal name. And we have a family name, because the family groups are going to be important. So like what family you belong to will be important. And I can decide later how those are going to be, like how you would say that, like this person of this family or this person, this family. I won't do the reverse order just because I think we'll keep it simple in that way. And then we will have diminutives. And these would that be inflection? I should just Google what inflection means because I'm useless. Inflection. I think that's what we want, right? A diminutive inflection. What about collective plurals? So would that be like collective plurals? Would that be like multiple forests, like a different way to refer to I'm Googling that real quick. Okay. A plural collective noun takes a plural verb. Families enjoy this restaurant. Okay, yeah. So a noun that is referring to a collective. Okay, yeah. That could be prevalent. If I did that, where you have, so I think if I'm understanding, this would be noun classes for singular versus collective. And then, yeah, collective plural is like all of something. The other end, there's a apostle. Yes, okay. I think we're on the same page. So yeah, so I could have noun classes for singular versus collective versus like some number. Like a specific amount, right? Like I could have a duology or something. Or a duo, not duology. But so I could have that, and if I had that, then it would matter if I did this, because you could have, well, wait, would it matter? That would be the class. That would have to be the class. And then the morphology would be just plurality, I think, right? So it would be multiple of a single thing of a collective, multiple of a collective. Is that essentially what we would have there? If I'm thinking about this right, so like if you have cases along the top, so let's see, you had like singular, duo, many, and then you would have plurality. Is that sort of what it would be? What program are you using? I mean, I'm running in Java, but this is a program I've written, but it's I'm using IntelliJ, that's my IDE, and I'm writing in Java, and this right here is just an MD file, if that helps. But I'm slightly confused by this. I'm not sure if that would be bringing of additional value that would be notable. Although I do like I like the idea of this. I'm just not sure with the number of how few like noun cases we're doing that are actually like gonna be cases. Like it feels weird to have two things that are based off the numbers. Although that could be like a thing. Like that could be a interesting feature about it, maybe. I don't know. If anyone's thoughts on that, let me know. But we can come back to that. Think on it a bit. But yes, so first name, family name, diminutives, which would essentially just be like add-ons. And then I'm not going to build names from meaningful words just because no one would ever be able to tell the difference. And they would probably mean different things than the places. So, like, no one would ever be able to pick up on that unless talking about it was a thing. But, like, we could just assume that happens. Yeah, so I think that's what we want there. And then I want honorifics. And I want this to be a suffix or postfix. I don't know why I feel like postfix is a word. But I have these rough levels of like classes or castes in the society. So there's like the ruler who's above everyone, and then there's like people born to the elite class, and then there's oh, chat lag is real. Probably I'm using StreamYard, so I think there is a lag between these, but yeah, I'm just kind of assuming that if like people message something, it'll take like a minute for me to get it, I assume, I think, maybe. So I'm just hopping around as needed. It's fine. But yes, so I have the idea of an elite class, which fits in because some of the political, like, social changes that have been going on in my society in the last few, like, decades, few hundred years is kind of similar to, like, Joseon era kind of things where you have the what are they called again? The like different ministers and stuff that are really in charge and the king is less in charge, and then people that are related to or in those families is a big deal. So there's sort of that aspect, but the whether or not their elite is coming from their relationship to this like lost entity that used to choose their ruler, sort of. So people that are born to that class of people that descend from those people that like their ancestors were chosen, essentially. And then that same class, but the people that were sworn to it. So these are people that basically like give up their previous family and basically swear allegiance and fealty to this new family. So like they sort of, not that they're like owned by or belong to, but like that sort of a concept. They've basically sworn themselves to this bloodline. And there's a distinction between people that are actually of the bloodline and people that are sworn to it. So I think there'd be slightly different honorifics for that. And the distinction could be a formal, informal thing. I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about it, but I want that distinction to be a thing. And then you have normal people, which normal people might just not have an honorific, I think. Like, it could be maybe in more formal settings you would use these honorifics, but maybe this one actually maybe has no honorific, like it's the default. And then those who were abandoned or kicked out of the elite families. So they were either like sworn to an elite family and were kicked out because they like, betrayed them or something, or they willingly left and thus are given this like lower class status. And that would be, and I mean, not honor, but it'd be like the opposite of an honorific, right? For those people to label them as someone that has basically rejected the societal principle. So I think I would have 4 then that are actually honorifics, and I guess they would be used in more formal situations, so you probably wouldn't use this honorific in addition to the diminutive. I think that makes sense, right? So these would be more formal. Question mark there. I think that makes sense to do. Oh, I just clicked over to YouTube. Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay. Postfix and suffix are basically the same thing. Okay, good. I am glad I am not literally crazy with that. Yeah. So, I think we want to have that. So then I guess there would be a lot of forms for names. So when I define a name or a person, what I would have is their personal name. I would have their like class level, which would generate a version for me that has the honorific. Like, this is their name, this is the formal version of their name with the honorific. And then I would have probably the family name, and then maybe diminutives, all the diminutives. It could just generate every single one of them. This is what it would look like when you apply that. I think that's everything I would need for names. So it would be, this would happen automatically. I could either provide this or it could be generated, and then the personal name could be generated. Age/seniority honorifics are probably the most common in real world languages. Yeah, I've definitely seen those a lot, especially in cultures where like, I can't remember which video I was watching, but I was watching one where they showed like, these are all the different caste levels that you could be, and then depending on who you're talking to changes all of these different things, and it's like super complicated. And so I think we can do this and it's reasonable. I don't like the idea of doing age or seniority just because that's not like a relevant thing in the culture, right? Like having that level of seniority based off someone that's older than you isn't necessarily a thing. The cultural evolution, I guess, right now that's going on is moving from a more not individualistic in like what Americans would think of as an individualistic society, but more individualistic to more collective where, you know, your kinship group, your family, right, is more superior. So I think eventually down the road, if that evolution continued, it might make more sense for like there to be more like age and seniority honorifics, like from a cultural perspective. But that's not super ingrained in the culture yet. Let's see. One of my cultures has a distinctive way of denoting someone bonded to a noble house as a proposed. Yes. Yeah. So did you do that with like a suffix or did you have another way of doing that? Because that's essentially what this is going to be, the born to this this like family, right? Which it wouldn't be like I don't that's another question. Do the honorifics necessarily go on the personal name or the family name? That's something I'll have to think about. Like that may also be something where like if it's I guess if you're using the full name, maybe you apply it to the family name, whereas if you're just using the first name, you can apply it to that. Maybe I'll have to think about that. There's also a way to initiate an emancipated slave's former household association. Yeah. So you're kind of going in the same direction or went in a similar direction that I'm trying to go through with this. Yeah. Autocorrect and phone keyboard size. Yes. I actually had to connect a different keyboard. I don't know if you've seen any of my streams, but I have a normal keyboard right now. Normally I have this like split keyboard, but it doesn't have all the characters, and if I'm coding, I need all the fancy syllables and all my like I need I need the what is it? Muscle memory of knowing where all the weird keys are. So I had to switch that. If you bind yourself to a noble house, do you bring your family with you? No. You basically abandon your family when you do it. Um So typically, if like you were gonna bind yourself and you already had a family, you might like bind your whole family to it, right? Um, or if you were already bound to this family and you had a kid, you could probably decide what you would like label them as, right? Like when they're born, you could probably decide, but I think most likely they would end up being you'd want them bound to that family too, or maybe you could go with like your ancestral family name instead. Um, or maybe if like the spouse isn't bound to the family, they would take that name potentially. Um, so yeah, I think it would have to be like either you, and that could probably be a thing where there would be certain like other bloodlines that just they're always sworn to that family, and that's kind of like a thing they just do as a tradition. Seems like the honorific should be applied to your given name, then almost like a sir if you're knighted. Yeah, yeah. I think that makes sense because I think it's either you do it that way or like Lord and Lady is one of the ones I keep thinking about. Where like if you're just using their first name, you would say like Lady Penelope. But if you're talking about like the Lord or Lady of like a place, it could be like Lady Fairweather City, right? Like you could have that distinction either way because then it's the title, I guess, which isn't the family name. I guess that's a title. So you would get the honorific on the title, which we don't have titles here. So on the given name it is. Also, children of such servants are born into that bonded life by default. Oh, I like that. Separate word to mark not of blood. I like it. I like it. So where? So honorifics. As a suffix. We'll go with that. Okay, so I don't think there's any complicated things that we'll need to do for the lexicon, other than eventually start actually generating like morphemes and words. And then for place names, I think those are basically just going to be compounded nouns. Like, I don't think there's going to be any fancy additional rules for them. At least I don't think, anyway. So let's see. We did the phonotactics. Compounding nouns will be fine. I'm trying to think of like programmatically what I'll need to do, but I'm probably gonna cut this soon-ish, like maybe in the next like 5 or 10 minutes. But I want to make a list first of what we need to do. But so for word ordering, I think I just need to document that, because word ordering is going to need to be a me thing, because the program won't know what type of thing I'm asking it to generate. So document order. I don't think it'll come up anywhere else. I think I'll want to have a separate method for compounding versus like if I want it to translate like a sentence, if I want it to actually compound it. Compounding nouns. Yes, and then we might have some specific rules for joining them. We can see if we run those through like the various validators, if that's sufficient, or if you want to add additional rules, like if there's certain endings that need to be changed or morphed to make it make sense. Or I can always, once it's generated, I can always then change it and add it to the lexicon. Which I think we'll want that. And then, yes, that will apply to that. We'll just document all of that. And then for noun cases, yes, I like, did I actually decide what I wanted to do here? I'm not sure, but I feel like if we're going with head initial, verb / adjectives precede object, then it could be a prefix for plurality. So I need to decide on which like plurality cases to include. And what those affixes will be. And then we can make sure that the generator will automatically look that up. If I say like many blah, it will apply the affix to the word that it's either looking up in the lexicon or generating. So I need to decide on that. And then yeah. Which I could probably just include as part of the compounding logic. Like I could add a plurality into that and it'll add it at the beginning potentially. So then I need to just figure out which word is going to go between the possessee and possessor for possession. So just generate and add that to the lexicon. That'll be pretty simple. And then I think we're skipping noun classes for now. Like we may come back and do this, but I'll do a little bit more research on this off stream and think about it, but I think we'll skip that. So then first name, family name, diminutives. So for the first name and the family names, I think I really just need to come up with any additional validators. So like if I want there to be any characteristics that are different based off, you know, I don't know, just the fact that they are first names, like if there'll be any special rules for that. maybe for the family names or surnames, maybe those could have like a few fixed like endings to them, because we won't have anything added onto the family names, but we will the first names. So it could be good to have the family names look a lot more distinctive, given that the personal names are going to be changing a lot as we add honorifics and diminutives and stuff like that. So maybe more like fixed suffixes, although that's maybe the wrong word, but like ending coda, I think is the part I'm thinking about. And then we'll need to just, I think, generate these. As suffixes, I think. Or, you know, like something that would add on or change the end. And then same thing with honorifics. Like, these aren't things that I'm going to need to generate a lot of. I'll just need to generate them once and make sure I like it. And then I might want to tie some of the diminutives and honorifics into some like root morphemes that might mean things potentially. So for these, we just need to generate and add logic to the name generator. And then we already have this as basically what the generator would look like. Yeah, okay. I think that makes sense. I think that's a pretty good list of things to do. And then as we start generating things, we can always tweak some of the like phonotactics or phonetics if we decide we need any other logic there. And I think potentially if I have time between now and I think the next stream is like, let me look, because I have a tournament this Saturday, which will be fun. I've been practicing a lot for that. I look super beat up right now. I don't even know if you can see that on the camera. I'm very bruised at the moment, but I think it's almost like 2 weeks before the next stream. So I think, is it? Yeah. Yeah. So I think I will have time to go through and try and write some of the code parts of this, like not the actual like generation of it, but like come up with just some of the Java code backend part of it, just so that you guys don't have to sit here and watch me like write Java code, because that probably isn't very fun for you. So I'll try to come up with some of that before the next stream. Gnarly. I assume that's for my fun bruises. Yeah. I always like have to, like when I'm wearing short sleeves, have to, you know, preface it with people like, I promise this was like consensual violence with swords and not anything problematic. Because like they do, I feel like you can't, I don't know what you can see them, but like you can, they're like sword marks like up my arm. But it's always fun. It's always fun. People give me weird looks sometimes, but sword fighting is dangerous even when the swords are not sharp and you're wearing lots of armor. But yes, I think that's all that we need to get through today. I think we got through a lot of the basics, and we'll just have to actually start generating things and coming up with like a name for the language and all of that maybe next time. I feel like we got a lot done, but yeah, I don't know how you like end these things. I know Artifactian has a really cool way to end his, and I do not. But maybe one day, give it a few years, and maybe I'll come up with something. But yes, I will see you all in the next one in whenever it's scheduled. It's already scheduled on YouTube, so you can always follow that if you're not already. And it's in the Discord event if you're not in that. And yeah, if you think of anything, like let me know there or comment here, and I can add a note to look over next time. But thank you everybody for coming. This has been a pretty, you know, easy first stream. You know, I've streamed before, but not by myself. So yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I will see everyone around later. Have a good night.